Hello friends, and welcome to Ariel's Twilight Years, how to be a really old model. I'm in West Sussex this week, which is where I grew up, so I'm always rather happy to come back here as an adult, especially because most of the time I spent here was during the time I was a Jehovah's Witness, so I didn't think I was ever going to grow up and have a job because we were being taught the world was about to end, so that's fun. I am here today to conclude my short series about ethics in pornography. So today I want to talk about how to be an ethical performer or an ethical model, depending on what term you prefer. When we talk about ethics in porn, we do tend to focus on ethical consumption and ethical production. And I can see why, because female models aren't especially likely to be sexually predatory on set, and they're not especially likely to start stalking people in the way that consumers from time to time do and producers from time to time do. But that doesn't let us off from a responsibility to behave ethically at work, not least because it's the job of all of us in porn to make sure that we do protect our reputation so we can defend ourselves with honesty and say that plenty of people are behaving ethically within our profession. So I'm about to become a massive pick-me and talk about the things that I think models and performers really need to avoid doing in order to behave ethically towards the producers they work with, but also towards their fans and customers. So let's get started. 1. If you're booked by a photographer or a producer, just be honest and upfront about what you are happy actually doing on screen. Because just as photographers and producers have a responsibility not to push your levels at a shoot, you have a responsibility not to pretend that you're happy doing one thing and then kind of pull back on that on the day. From time to time, I have encountered models taking bookings that they don't actually really want and hoping that when they get to the shoot, they can kind of renegotiate what they're actually shooting. So an example of this would be someone who's actually not comfortable with bondage, accepting a purely bondage shoot, and then hoping that once she turns up, if she acts sufficiently unwilling, the photographer will just shoot something else with her. And obviously, if that producer's only commercial outlet is for bondage, that's not fair. Now, this isn't, I don't think, a particularly widespread problem, but it is something that especially quite new models do sometimes fall into the trap of doing. The same with any limitations you have physically, like any injuries that will stop you doing certain things. Like, I'm quite injury prone. I've had long-term injuries all the way through my career, and I'd much rather not tell producers that there are some things that can be problematic for me, but I have to. That's just me being a responsible adult. And it's embarrassing, and sometimes I'm scared that people won't book me if I'm honest that, for example, I can't do those hog ties where your head is pulled back to your toes because my neck locks up. It's just the case. I have to be honest about that, because if someone books me expecting to do that, I'm not going to be able to do it. Similarly, these days, because so many models and performers are producing their own content, I think it's really important to be honest with your customers about what they're going to get behind your paywall. And sadly, I have heard from quite a lot of customers over the last few years that they'll join someone's OnlyFans because it advertises boy-girl video or something, and that is not there anywhere. The content does not exist. Or they'll be promised 200 sexy solo videos, and when they join the website, actually there's only 20 or none. It's really important, not just for your customers, but for the reputation of all of us in this industry, for us just to be honest about what our product is. Because the great thing about working in this field is you don't have to shoot anything you don't want to do. All you have to do is be honest about what you actually are producing and what people will get if they join your OnlyFans or your loyal fans or your membership site. And traditionally, people have generally been fairly honest about that, but because so many new people have entered the industry because of the success of OnlyFans / loyal fans / Fansly, all of those things, I think there is a little bit of a Wild West environment going on at the moment, and there is some conduct that is either next door to scamming or actual scamming going on, and I would like to see all of that behaviour leaving the industry again, because it does not do any of us any favours in the long run. You might get short-term income from lying to people about what they're going to get if they pay for your content, but you are not going to get a long-term positive reputation reputation, and you're also going to impact the reputation and therefore the trust within the industry for other performers and producers and models. 5 years ago, I would never have thought I would have to talk about this. I actually wrote an article for Quillette magazine in praise of OnlyFans about 5 years ago. And a lot of the things I said in that article, which were true at the time, which I was sincere about at the time, I couldn't say now, because actually I have seen a whole lot of what I consider to be catfishing entering my industry when it comes to model producers. What I mean by that is that it has become quite a prevalent thing for OnlyFans creators, especially the more successful ones, to hire people to pretend to be them, to chat to their customers. Now, I'm aware that some customers probably know that's what's happening and they're happy to buy into the fantasy. But I think it's probably important that you let your customers know that the sexting packages you offer aren't necessarily with you, because I just think about how violated I'd feel if I'd thought I'd spent time talking to a male heterosexual dominant about my personal fantasies that perhaps I'd never told many people about before, and then I discovered I'd actually been talking to a lesbian woman who'd just been pretending. I'd feel horribly violated, and I think a lot of women will know how that feels, having been catfished online in some way or another. And I really think it would be great if we didn't sort of exploit customers, potentially kind of predate on customers. I understand that some customers probably know, or at least suspect, that it's not you replying to them 24/7 on your OnlyFans, but I think that the lack of trust between creator and customer that this kind of practice is producing, I don't think it's good for any of us. I think it, again, creates this sort of Wild West environment where some customers stop being respectful and treating you like a human being because they're not really being treated respectfully and like human beings themselves. One thing I've noticed on OnlyFans especially is with the prevalence of this kind of 24/7 sext thing happening, the kind of messages I get have become a lot less human, sometimes actually kind of dehumanizing, very crass, like very crude, and very impatient. Like if you don't reply within kind of 6 hours, you'll have multiple messages from someone saying, where are you? Where are you? Why are you ignoring me? And I think that's because they have been educated into expecting a response within the hour. And obviously an actual real creator working on her own is not going to be able to do that. So as an industry, I think we should look at those practices and consider not taking part in them, because honestly, this is a controversial thing to say probably, but I think it's only a matter of time before someone ends up being prosecuted for this practice, which is tantamount to catfishing. And because you're getting money from it, I think that's somewhat fraudulent. I think it might even count as financial fraud. So personally, I would say if you're going to have a fan site and you're going to offer one-to-one contact, it should be with you. And if it can't be with you, perhaps you shouldn't offer it. I know that's not going to be a popular thing to say, but I don't think in the long term it's going to be good for the reputations of creators like me. And I don't honestly think it's long-term good for customers either, because I think it's giving them a really unrealistic expectation of how available a real-life girlfriend even would be. Because if my husband's texting me in the middle of the night, I'm often not replying because I'm asleep. And I think customers should probably get used to that idea. I think it's more realistic. Oh my God, this should be simple, but a lot of creators like me in the last 10 years or so, even longer for some of us, and certainly since COVID, quite a large part of our income comes from shooting custom videos. Like, I love shooting custom videos. But as I talk to customers, and as I've done so over the years, I have discovered that every one of them, if they've been a kind of long-term prolific custom video customer, they have had at least one experience where the model has just ghosted them after they've paid. They've never received their video, or they've received it very, very, very late, or they've received it and it's been by no means as described. Please don't do that. Firstly, because it makes it more difficult for all the honest creators. But secondly, and much more importantly, that is just a horrible thing to do to someone who has trusted you with their very private sexual tastes. I imagine telling someone something really intimate about my sexual tastes if I wasn't a model and if everyone didn't already know about them. If I think back to 25-year-old me who hadn't told anyone yet that she was kinky, if I'd told someone that because I trusted them as a professional, and then they betrayed that trust by not producing the thing I paid them for, in this scenario a custom video. I think not only would I feel ripped off, but I'd also be scared that, okay, if this isn't a trustworthy person, what are they going to do with this information I've just shared with them? Are they going to publicise it? And I think it's a really thing to do to people. Personally, I think you should kind of go further than that in order to help especially first-time customers to trust us. For a solo video, I don't really see any reason not to give someone a guaranteed delivery date. It does make me feel quite sad when I sometimes hear customers say things like, oh, well, I've been waiting for 3 months for this video. She said she'd deliver it in September. Like, now it's December and I'm hoping I'll get it before the end of the year. And I think, you know, if something goes wrong, like if you get COVID or something, sure, you might have to delay shooting by a week or something. But if we want to be treated like sex work is work, which I very much do, and I think a lot of us do, I feel like it's really helpful if we behave like it's any other job. Like if you book a plumber, you expect them to turn up on the day that you've agreed. And I feel like if someone books you as a model or any kind of sex worker, or for a custom video, delivering in a timely, professional manner sends a really positive professional impression and hopefully just begins to create a little more trust in our industry. And that is good for all of us, for producers, for customers, creators, performers. That's good for all of us, because if we can build a high trust industry, when people from the outside say judgmental things about us, we'll be able to argue back with truth that actually our industry is full of people behaving with integrity. And I think generally speaking, this is true. But whenever I hear stories like this, I really wish that we did better as a group, because we don't have a governing body. We don't have any people imposing rules on us from the top down. So it's up to us to self-regulate. And generally, I think we do a pretty good job of that. But I think there's always room for improvement. And just treating people who have shared personal details with you with respect feels like a good starting point. Not to say you should be a pushover. If someone's abusive towards you or unfeasibly difficult, it's totally fine to walk away. Just don't take their money and walk away. Oh, this is a difficult one to talk about. But for any models and creators who are on portfolio sites, so anyone who is booking shoots with photographers, there's a reference system. For example, on Purpleport, which is the main model network site that we use in the UK, and actually it's relatively popular elsewhere in the world now as well, there is a reference system. So if I work with a photographer and have a good time, I can go onto his portfolio, I can say that I've shot with him, I can say what day it happened, I can say whether or not the photographer turned up, I can say whether or not I recommend him, and if I do recommend him, I can write a reference detailing why I recommend him. And that system allows us also to say when we don't recommend someone. Now, earlier on in my career, I used that system very sparingly. I left positive references all the time, but I sort of felt like unless a crime was committed, leaving a negative reference maybe just felt a bit below the belt. And I was totally wrong about that. If you're made to feel seriously uncomfortable or unsafe, or if you are in an environment that falls massively short of a professional photo studio, like if the studio you turn up to is filthy and stinking, these are the kind of things you should leave a negative reference for. Now, I understand the reticence to leave a negative reference, and I had bad experiences early in my career where I didn't leave the negative reference that now I know I should have done. I just didn't leave a reference at all, because I guess I worked on the principle if you've not got anything to say that's nice, don't say anything at all. But that didn't really help keep other models from having similar experiences. Obviously, if I'd been sexually assaulted or anything serious, I would have left a negative reference and I'd have gone to the police, which eventually I did do when that happened to me. But I used to, I suppose, let my silence do the talking for me. If I didn't leave a positive reference, it's because I didn't think the shoot was worthy of a positive reference. But I have now had a couple of very bad experiences at shoots, and the photographer who's given me that bad experience has had hundreds of positive references. And sometimes in the wake of the bad experience, when I talk to models who've left those positive references, I will discover that actually their experience wasn't positive at all. So they've left false positives. And I do think we need to just stop doing that. Once upon a time, I think that models were so dependent on photographers to make money because we didn't have any other way of making money, that it was very challenging indeed to leave a negative reference. These days, for example, I am in a really strong financial position and I can afford to leave negative references willy-nilly if I want to. It will stop people booking me if I leave a load of them, but that would actually be okay financially. I don't want to stop working with photographers, but I could afford not to work with photographers. I am speaking from a position of a certain amount of privilege, but most models these days do have alternative ways of making money because of fan sites, because of being able to sell your own content, because of being able to photograph yourself. Leaving false positive references is something that I think is less and less defensible if you want to protect your fellow model, and if you also just want to send a message to photographers that there are certain standards we just expect. We don't expect to be sexually harassed or assaulted. We don't expect to have you say inappropriate things to us. We don't expect to have you touching us inappropriately. We don't expect to have you try to delay us from leaving the shoot. All of these kind of things. If these things happen to us, we need to leave negative references to let other models know, because there is no other way for them to know. So I would love to see us as a community get better at that. And if you're asked for a reference from a model, just always reply. Always, always, always. It's always the first thing I do. If I get a reference request from a model, it's the first thing I reply to. And that has not always been my experience when I've asked for references from other models. So I know it doesn't pay you, and in the short term it doesn't advantage you in any way to help other models stay safe, but in the long run it's good for all of us. And finally, in this day and age where female creators, model creators, are in such a strong position to earn money without producers and photographers, the last decade in this industry has been so good for female producers like me, but traditional male producers are hurting financially. I know many people who've gone out of business because the market has become more hostile towards traditional male producers who have to hire models. Models have become more expensive because we can work in other areas. It's harder to charge what you were for your product maybe 20 years ago because there's more competition, and there's increased regulation which has made staying compliant on various platforms more and more difficult. So, because I've been in this industry a long time, like 21 years, I know that a lot of producers gave me my start in my career. They gave me my first chances when I was untested, unknown. They booked me, they paid me, and they promoted me. Obviously, models who've come into the industry more recently won't have necessarily had that experience, but especially for those of us who do, in part, owe our careers to the people who trusted us back in 2005, I think this is a time where, as performers and female creators, I think it would be really good if we tried to support the producers who are maybe now struggling. So try to be fair with your rates if you can. Try not to inflate your rates, especially for people you've worked with before. Obviously, you'll have to increase them with inflation, at least to some extent. But I know it has got very expensive to hire models, and it's not a time when a lot of producers can really afford to increase their rates as much as they would like to. And if you can, I would say try hiring male producers as riggers if you shoot bondage, or as on-screen tops if you shoot that sort of stuff, or just as photographers. In this industry, it is rather a woman's world at the moment, and so treating male producers and photographers well, paying them fairly, supporting them, tagging them properly, it just feels like what we should do, given that a lot of us are really reaping the financial rewards of being in this industry. I know that makes me sound like a massive pick me, and I'm not saying that it's your job to support all the male producers out there, but I do think that being a decent feminist involves noticing not only the times where you are disadvantaged as a woman, but also noticing the times where being a woman is an advantage, like it is in sex work, and therefore doing your best to raise men up in the way that good feminist men have done in other areas of business. So those are my thoughts on being a massive pick me / being an ethical performer / creator. Now I'm going to get ready for a 2-day studio day, which is going to be quite challenging for me because I'm shooting art nude and bondage, but more art nude than bondage, so that's quite physically challenging for my body. And I've picked up some sort of fucking arm/shoulder injury, which I've acquired from doing ballet classes. All the bits of me I thought I'd injure from ballet, where basically the only thing you do with your arms is kind of this. I did not expect that to injure me, and yet here we are. Thanks as always for listening. As always, I am Ariel Anderson. I'll be back next month with more, and it's goodbye from me. Bye-bye. Bye-bye now. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.